What's up, everybody? So, for those of you who know me, you know that I was incarcerated before. People who watch my videos, I've talked about my incarceration before. I was locked up from 2000 to 2006. And one of the reasons I don't talk about it very much is because, the prison stories are a dime a dozen here on YouTube. There's tons of guys out there with all kinds of different prison stories, and it's all very generic, whether they've seen killings or rapings or people getting beat up or whatever it is. The prison stories are all pretty standard, so I really don't feel like I have anything to contribute as far as that goes. So I'm not talking about that today, okay? But I'm gonna tell you one thing that I've at least never seen, or you don't see very often, of ex-prisoners talking about, is the impact that their time had on their family or their loved ones. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Specifically, how my incarceration impacted my father. So, as I said, I was incarcerated from 2000 to 2006. I actually got arrested on June 13th, 2000. And at the time, I was 18 years old. I had just turned 18 on April 4th of that year. And my father at that time, my father was born in January of 63, so that would make him 37. So he was 37 and I was 18 years old, and I still lived with him. And his health at that time was okay, but not perfect. So he had been diagnosed with diabetes, like, I don't know, a year or two before. So we already knew he was diabetic. And my father, he was a large guy. He was 6'2" and, I don't know, maybe like 300 pounds. So a little bit overweight as well. For 6'2", maybe a lot overweight, but yeah. So overweight. He's diabetic, and maybe other little things. But in general, he was fairly healthy. He would still go to work every day. And my father's Mexican. He's full Mexican. I'm half Mexican, and he's a stereotypical Mexican guy as far as just really die hard going to work. It doesn't matter if it was in the morning, swing shift, graveyard shift, however many days a week. Just a very die hard worker, work till you die type of person. You just go and go and go. You make money for your family. That's what you do. Very, very hard worker. My dad was, right? And so, so his health was okay. He was still going to work, wasn't in a wheelchair, nothing like that. He was okay, right? And then, like I said, on June 13th, 2000, my stupidity, I always had a gun on me at that time. I always carried it around in my pocket or in my car or whatever. And so I had a gun on me while I was at work. I was working at a food establishment. I'm not going to say which one. I've talked about my incarceration in other videos. But anyhow, I had a gun on me, and me and another customer got into a verbal altercation, and it escalated to the point of me pulling out the gun on the customer. Yada, yada, yada. He calls the police. The police are looking for me. All this. I take off. The police are looking for me. I'm not going to get into the story. But anyhow, it culminated in, I got away from the scene, and the police went to my house looking for me. And, they told my dad, they found my dad and said, hey, we're looking for him. He's got a gun. Obviously, I'm like a threat to society at this point. This was before really like school shootings were a big thing and all that. So it wasn't as big of a deal, but still, it's a guy with a gun in public. So it was a big deal. So they're scaring my dad a little bit, saying, hey, if we find him, he's basically a shoot to kill. So, my dad's already getting scared at this point. I did not think about a lot of how it impacted him at the time. A lot of the stuff that I'm telling you is hindsight stuff. Me looking back on it as I became an adult myself, and as I became a parent myself, and so thinking about what he had to experience as a father going through this. Okay, so I'm trying. I've since tried to imagine, the police coming to your house and looking for your child. Hey, your child's wanted, and basically them telling them, hey, we're gonna kill your child if we find him first. So my dad ended up getting in contact with me, funnily enough, by pager. Pagers were still popular back then, and so he paged me, asking me to call him. So I paged him, and he told me what I just told you, that the cops are looking for me, etc. And he basically pleaded with me, again, as a father, please turn yourself in. because he's my father, and he doesn't want the police to shoot his son. Okay, so we had back and forth a little bit, him and I, because I obviously I didn't want to go to jail. But ultimately, I was like, okay, for him, I'll turn myself in. So I did. All right, and again, I'm gonna skip through all the prison stuff because dime a dozen stories, and plus I've kind of talked about this before. But basically, I turn myself in. They arrest me. And I go to jail. Eventually I get convicted, and I get a prison term of 7 years actually, and you do a percentage of your term for good behavior. You do good behavior, you get out a little bit early. So I got out after 6 years of my 7 years term. Okay, but now what did my father go through in that 6 years? And again, like I said, that's not something that really at the time when I was doing my time that I thought a lot about. I mean, I knew he was sad. An 18-year-old. I don't want to, group all 18-year-olds or stereotype all 18-year-olds, but one thing that is scientifically proven is 18 years old, your brain is not fully developed at that time. So, ironically, the whole time I was incarcerated, from 18 to 24, my brain is still developing that entire time. And basically, it's finally when I got out, what science would say, yeah, that's officially when you became an adult. That's officially when your brain stopped developing. So the whole time I was incarcerated, even though, the government would say, oh, he's an adult or whatever, science would say, well, technically, maybe not. I'm not trying to absolve myself. I'm just saying, so your mentality is different. So I didn't understand emotions as I do now. Especially, like I said, I didn't have a child then. And so I was more childlike myself. And so my emotions were very on the level. That's my point. So, I love my father. I understand that he was sad or whatever. But I didn't know, like, the full depth of what I was doing to my father by being incarcerated. And by that, I mean, what I realized later is essentially every day that I was locked up, he was locked up. Okay, obviously not physically, but mentally he was there with me. Mentally, every day, it had to run through his mind. My child's in prison, and, he's subject to whatever. Someone could kill him, rape him, beat him up, and I did. If you see my top front tooth, it's chipped. That's not from bad hygiene. That was from an officer. My head got slammed on the table, and it chipped my tooth off. And I got in fights. I got my butt kicked a few times, really bad. Broken nose, my what do they call it, black eyes, all that kind of stuff, right? And so, A, he's worried about that stuff happening, right? Every day that I'm in there. And then B, when it does happen, it's like, oh, now my nightmare is coming true, like literally, like all the stuff that I'm worried about every time that I would get beat up, or like I said, when the thing happened with the cop and chipping my tooth, it's like, oh, of course, from his perspective, it's like, oh, of course my son is going through this stuff, right? And, as a father, again, what I realized later is when you have a child, you're so emotionally invested in the life of that other person, your child, that it pains you. It physically pains you when something happens to your child. I mean, it could be something small as maybe your child has a stomach ache and they're throwing up, or like a toothache or an earache or whatever. It obviously hurts them physically, but it stresses you out so much because you love that person so much and you don't want them to be sick or in pain, that it hurts you too. Okay, and so to the extreme of that is obviously when your son is incarcerated, or if something happens to your child and they lose a limb or become disabled, or there's a story in the news recently, a YouTuber, he was doing a prank and he got shot in the stomach, right? And I'm not getting into that, whether the guy was justified or not in shooting him. But I'm just talking about from the parent's perspective, it pains you when something happens to your child, right? And so that day to day of my dad having to endure that, thinking about what's happening with my child, is today the day that I'm going to get a call that he got killed or something else happened to him. So the day to day, it's constantly dragging down on his health. So sure enough, my dad went from, like I said, he was diabetic, overweight, but still, like I said, working, whatever. He went from that to where over time, over like maybe, I don't know, say 2 years, to where his bad health really started to skyrocket. So he went from the diabetic and overweight to more overweight, heart problems, like high blood pressure. His body was retaining fluid, so now his weight ballooned to, I don't know, maybe 325, 350 or something like that. His body was retaining fluid, having heart conditions. He ended up developing neuropathy, so he had, what is it called, nerve problems. And again, at the time, my ignorant self wasn't aware that I was inadvertently causing that, Again, I'm a kid mentally, kind of. I mean, I'm adult in some ways, but I just can't explain to where there comes a point in your life and where you understand emotions more and feelings more, and you're more empathetic, whatever, right? You understand about what other people are going through more, right? And so at the time he was going through that, I didn't really put two and two together, as they say, that basically me being locked up was contributing to his health diminishing, right? But sure enough, as the time goes by, it got worse and worse. He would go to the doctor and get fixed up or whatever. But eventually I got out, and he was still alive. So 2006 came, I got out, he was still alive, right? But the damage had already been done, so to speak. It's not like, okay, you're out, everything is okay now. Oh, I could go back and, you can't undo hypertension or neuropathy or anything like that. The damage is done. But again, I'm ignorant to all this still. I didn't realize my part in his diminishing health 2 years later, right? But anyhow, so his health had already been affected, right? And also another thing that I'm going to tell you that ex-prisoners don't talk about is that when you get out of prison, the problems don't end, okay? It's not like when you get out of prison, all of a sudden everything is better now, okay? From a parent's perspective, from a dad's perspective, obviously it's a joyous moment. My son is out of prison. I could hold him now, take him home with me. Your child is back home, okay? But mentally, I'm messed up. For the past 6 years, my mind has been molded to all this prison stuff, especially in California. California is very segregated, racist. I was literally told to avoid doing anything with black people. Like, can't play cards, and can't eat with them, can't even talk to them in some situations. Just a very segregated, racist environment, okay? Not to mention all the other prison rules by the guards and just whatever else. Prison's a crazy place. You could hear all those stories elsewhere. But my point is that when you get out, you still have all that psychological damage and trauma. And so now it's like PTSD for military people. It's not like the day that the military guys get out of the military, oh, I'm okay now. No, they still have all that psychological damage. And it's the same thing with being a prisoner. You get out, and it's not like, oh, hey, I'm out. Okay, I can spring back. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so now my point in telling you all that is that my dad's suffering didn't totally end when I got out, because I was still suffering. So because I didn't know how to function in society. Harder for me to get a job, harder for me to get a girlfriend. So I'm still going through stuff. And again, me not realizing at the time that everything that I'm going through, having trouble getting a job and a girlfriend and just even getting friends because I don't know how to talk to people, nothing like that. All that is hard for my dad too. On top of him obviously worrying, man, I hope my son's not going to be an idiot and do something to get himself back into prison or get killed or whatever. Just, that stuff. But then the normal stuff, oh, I hope my son could get a job and get a girlfriend and, have friends. And I didn't even want to go out in public. I just wanted to stay in my room and like play video games. I was that traumatized. It's like, I don't want to leave. I just didn't want to be in public. I didn't want to just do anything, right? And so, so the stress continued for my dad. And so his health continued to decline. Not as bad, because I was out, but it did continue to decline. So now fast forward, that was 2006. Fast forward, I don't know, a decade, and he's still okay. So say 2016, he's still okay, but his health, like I said, these problems don't go away. Neuropathy doesn't go away. There's no cure for diabetes. You can just, you can try to better your health. What he did, try with his diet and this and that, but you're still gonna have diabetes. You're still gonna have neuropathy. Your heart, maybe they could fix your heart. And they tried. He actually did end up having heart surgery, and he was okay for a while. And then he goes to heart surgery, and then they tell him, okay, well, this heart surgery is kind of like a temporary thing. It only lasts for like 10 years, and that made him more stressed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, he continued to go through a lot of stress, even with me, because I still never really figured things out. It's not like, hey, I got a good job, and hey, Dad, I'm making money now, so he could be relieved. It was still, I continued to struggle with a job and, with everything in life up until the day he died. And so I continued to stress his body to the day he died, right? And of course he had some relief when I had my child. That was a happy moment or whatever. But like I said, when your child is not doing well, it pains you. And so still the fact that basically I didn't have my shit together. Like I said, I didn't have a good job or a house, and having problems with my girlfriend and all this, and my son ended up being autistic, which my dad still loved him to death, but he knew that was harder on me, so that was harder on him, etc., etc., etc. Right? So my dad finally passes away in 2020, kind of from multiple complications. He might have had COVID. I don't know. He has so many health complications between his kidneys eventually gave out, and like I say, he had neuropathy, diabetes, maybe COVID, etc., etc., etc. So he finally passed away in 2020. And that's kind of when I really, really, really started thinking about it. There was times before that where I was contributing my initial incarceration to the downturn of his health, but it wasn't until he passed away that I really started to think about it. And I started to think about myself. I did that to him. When on June 13th, 2000. When he got that call, like I said, or when the police showed up to the house, hey, basically we're gonna kill your son if we find him first. How is a father supposed to take that? And so from that point, and for the next 6 years, like I said, every day that I was incarcerated, physically, he was incarcerated with me mentally. He was, he was there stressing with me and hoping that I would get out. And and so I put him through that major traumatic event on June 13th, 2000. And, it was kind of just like a snowball effect from there. Even, he was a little bit happy when I actually got sentenced, because he was like, because, when you go to court or whatever, like with the Trump thing, Trump goes to court and they're like, oh, hey, we got all these charges. Trump was like 30-something charges. That's what the courts do. They did the same thing with me. It's like, you commit one crime, but they charge you with like 20 or 30 things or whatever. So they come at you and they're like, oh, you could potentially get 20, 30 years, 50 years, 70 years, whatever, right? And trying to scare you into a plea bargain, all this, right? But again, from a parent's perspective, hearing this, oh, your child may go to prison for 10 years, 20 years. I mean, can you imagine the trauma of a parent, And so later on, like I said, 20 years later or whatever, when I finally started to put all this together, I'm like, I was the cause. I mean, not for everything. Of course, diet has, something to do with his declining health. He didn't always eat the perfect diet. He drank a lot of, soda, stuff like that. Didn't always eat the best foods. Maybe didn't exercise, whatever, right? And that's what I tried to do for a long time. Be like, well, he had bad habits. I tried to not blame myself. I tried to be selfish and not blame myself. But I came to the, I matured enough to the point one day I had to admit it to myself and say, no, Matt, it was you. You and your stupid, selfish antics. You want to be a badass and have a gun and run around with bad people and do whatever, and and you end up causing your dad just major, stress, psychological trauma, whatever you want to say. Basically, for the last 20 years of his life, from June 13th, 2020, to when he died in 2020. And so there was no other conclusion. I was like, it was my fault, that he went through all that. Not just the dying part, basically like torturing him for 20 years by, getting myself into trouble and incarcerated, and then not getting a good job. And maybe if I would have got out and I would have started to get a good job and turn my life around, maybe that would have made him not stress so much, and would have helped his health better. But I didn't. Basically continued to be a loser and everything for 20 years. And a person could only handle so much. A person's organs and their body and everything could only handle so much stress. It took his life. So, I really don't know what the point of this video is. It's kind of just me airing my thoughts. So, I don't know. They say, sometimes people say that, it's never too late to, like, change your ways, or never too late to, whatever, to start eating healthy or whatever. And that's not true. I'm going to tell you that right now. Because look, it doesn't matter what I do from this point. I don't care. I could become the richest person in the world and have the best life and be the best citizen, everything. But for my dad, it's too late. I've already lost my father. And so, yeah, it can be too late. It's not just prison. This isn't a video about prison. This is a video about, I don't know, life choices. And, what you do does impact the people that care about you and love you. And know that there's some things that can't be come back from. Like I said about that YouTuber, he was doing pranks and he got shot in the stomach. I mean, he's lucky that the gun didn't go a little bit higher, shoot him in the chest, and he'd be dead. And imagine, and that's it. I'm sorry, my nose is dry. And that's it. His dad, or his mom and his dad raised that little boy to, be a teenager, and then he ends up getting himself shot. And that's just it. There's no coming back. It's not like, all that people say it's never too late. No, that would be it. That'd be too late. He's lucky that he has a second chance. I'm lucky that I have a second chance. I had a second chance when I got out to do better, and I still flubbed that up, So, like I said, I don't know what this video is about. Just, I told my dad sorry about some of the stuff before he died. I did tell him sorry, and he forgave me, but there is a point to where it's too late. There is a point of no return to where, you can't go back. And like I said, even when I got out, his bad health conditions, the neuropathy and diabetes, it couldn't be undone. So there is a point of no return. Don't let people tell you, it's never too late. No, there does come a point to where it's too late. So if you can, try to make amends and do better or whatever before it is too late. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. If by some chance my dad could hear me, I would say, I'm sorry, Dad. I miss you very much. I love you.